I've made a film once, which we shall never talk about, maybe potentially. You would know. Honestly, go. Have fun with it. And I've been guilty of that at times, I will admit. And I freaking hated it.
So tell us a little bit about your background in arts.
Yeah, totally. So my name is Ahmed Ashour. I have been called an artist in the past. I've been called an audio producer in the past. I don't love labels. I like to say that I make things. So I've made art, I've made audio, I've made theater, I've made a film once, which we shall never talk about, maybe potentially. And I found myself in the creative field sort of by virtue of curiosity, really. I went to college thinking that I wanted to study engineering. Growing up, I always got good grades. And I think in this part of the world, you grow up thinking that good grades equates to wanting to study either medicine or engineering. And so, yeah, I went to college and I did 1 year of engineering and I freaking hated it. It was the worst thing on this planet. I could not get myself out of bed to go to something like an organic chemistry. But at the same time, I was spending a lot of time making theater, and I was performing in plays. I was performing in musicals. I ended up directing a bunch, which was what I really really loved and thought was my calling at one point. And that's what I studied in college. I studied theater and art history. It was the best decision that I could have ever made. And then since then widened my horizons. So I've moved on from theater to more gallery based performance installation art. I've also made, as I said, film. I've dabbled in producing music. I've made podcasts. I've made audio documentaries. And so I'm a jack of many trades, master of none. But I think someday I'll choose a lane and stick to it. Hopefully.
And how do you find yourself dabbling in all those things? Do you ever feel like you're not in focus? Do you ever feel like, you know what, maybe if I did this one thing, or maybe if I just did, I don't know, like entertainment or sorts, is that something that you find yourself in?
Yeah, I maybe it's by virtue of the self-diagnosed ADHD brain. I've always told myself that I'm gonna go and actually get checked out for ADHD because I always get an itch to move on to a new thing, to learn a new thing. I'm the kind of guy who is totally okay with trying something for like a few months or even a few weeks and then dropping it, but taking those few lessons that I've learned from the one thing and trying to apply them in the next sort of endeavors, so to speak. But yeah, I mean, I do think that eventually I would like to, be known for something. I think in the grand scheme of things, as someone who works in the media industry in general, I think it's a great thing to have many skills, many diverse skills. You're able to be sort of behind the equipment and in front of it. You're able to be very well spoken, but at the same time, very well versed in the way that the equipment works, right? Or like, how to run a soundboard, right? Or how to operate a camera, or, what good composition looks like. All of these things, they serve you at the end of the day, even if you sort of end up sticking to one thing and doing that well. But I'm a big proponent of trying different things out, making sure that you're really 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 able to find yourself in different positions and the same workplace, and then but being well known for that one thing that makes you stand out. And I think that's, in today's world, I think that's what really makes you special. That's what really brings people in and makes them want to work with you.
And how do you find yourself making a living in the arts? Because it is tough.
You would know. We would know. It's a hustle. It's a little bit of a hustle. How do I find myself making a living in the arts? I'm not gonna lie, like I did do a few odd jobs back in the day. Like I did work as a communications manager at a political think tank. I did do that. I worked in marketing. I've worked in, gosh, what have I worked in? I've worked in, cultural consultancy. So like working with arts projects as in the consultant capacity, so not as a creative, but more as a sort of like a researcher kind of capacity. And what I've come to realize is that really whatever it is that you do, even if you're an artist, like I think we need to bust this myth that art doesn't pay. Rather, yes, sometimes some creative projects are going to be these sort of self-initiated projects that won't have a payday at the end of the day, but you can always sort of twist the skills that you have and the skills that you offer into a job that pays. So, for example, I started working, in audio production a couple of years ago, and I had my full-time job. Like, I made audio for a full-time job, but then last summer I left that job and transitioned into a more freelance capacity, right? And so I've approached people and I've been like, hey, and people have approached me and they've been like, hey, you know how to produce audio, you know how to produce a podcast, like, let's work with you, right? And it's like, okay, yes, in that capacity, I'm not making podcasts, I'm not making an audio documentary, it's not a creative endeavor on my end, but I have the skills that have enabled me to make a living out of this. And honestly, I've really, really enjoyed freelancing more than I have, working a full-time job. I feel like it sort of checks a box in my creative brain where it's like you get to make your own hours, you get to be always on the go, on the run, on the move, switching projects, working on different things at the same time. And I think in a lot of ways, finding a lot of these smaller projects, each one pays maybe something that's not amazing, but you add them all up and it really turns out to be sort of something that feels like, yeah, I can live like this. This is exciting to me. And yeah, I mean, it also, I think, puts you in a place where you're constantly thinking about, okay, like, how can I sort of make my own thing as well that sort of becomes the cherry on top of all of this. And I am really, really excited about starting my own media endeavor, like my own media venture. Stay tuned. Stay tuned.
Awesome, man. Awesome. What difficulties have you found being one in arts and one being someone who doesn't have a full-time job?
Totally.
Like someone who's project-based, freelancing. I mean, it takes a toll on you sometimes. So how have you been able to navigate through those waters?
I think the biggest difficulty that I personally faced was, I actually studied for both high school and college. I spent in the US, and then, came back to Bahrain only because of the pandemic. And coming back to Bahrain, I think one really big realization that I had was that a lot of it is based on networking, right? And so spending nearly 7 years away from Bahrain and then working in Bahrain, you come to realize that, oh, that network is really what gets the ball rolling in terms of like your professional ability, right? Like your ability to work, to make money, to be creating work, to be in contact with the right people who are going to be giving you the opportunities that enable you to make work. And so, coming back in 2020, and especially during the pandemic, right, there weren't a lot of events happening, there weren't a lot of opportunities around. And so having to build that network from scratch in Bahrain, I think was one of the biggest challenges that I personally faced. But, I don't think I ever really, even during the pandemic, I don't think I ever really stopped, like, sort of, that sense of curiosity that I talked about earlier, like that even fed into the way in which I'm very, very extroverted. I very much put myself out there. I'm the kind of guy who'd like go to an event alone and just like, strike a conversation with someone that I don't know. And some of my really, really close creative acquaintances and collaborators have come out of these, random conversations and those random opportunities to network at like an event that, maybe no one invited me to, or, I didn't have a friend who was like, oh, let's go check out this thing. I just go there and like I'd find that one person who I felt connected to, and it would lead to a great collaboration. Actually, one of them in my most recent work that I did with Arwaq, that came out of one of those random, I showed up at an event, struck up a conversation with someone, and now I really really have a lot of respect and appreciation for that person's creative insight, and I was very, very lucky to get to work with them on that project that I did with Arwaq. So really that network bit was a big challenge. But honestly, what I will say is that Bahrain is so small, and that's the beautiful thing about it as well, is that if you drop a drop in the ocean is small. It might not be felt. It might not have that many ripples. But you know, in Bahrain, which I mean this in the most loving way, Bahrain is the most lovely pond, you know, and so when a drop hits that pond, it actually makes a lot of ripples. And so there are a lot of opportunities to do something small that really has a large impact in Bahrain, and that's what I really love about the creative scene here. And so, you know, even with that difficulty, I think Bahrain also kind of balances that out with the ability to like make yourself known on a larger capacity.
How do you network incorrectly?
Ooh, how do you network
Work
incorrectly?
So what is something that you think you shouldn't be doing or we shouldn't be doing as networking
Yeah,
goes?
totally.
What's
Totally.
the wrong way to network?
That's the wrong way to network, especially as a creative. Look, I'll be very honest. We Bahrainis, we love to criticize the living existence out of something, right? We love to see something and we look at it and we're like, oh my God, يعني مرة ليش all of these people are so excited about this? I can do this, da 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 da. I've been guilty of that at times, I will admit. But I think what I've really noticed is that, you know, treating people with respect and making them feel seen and heard, even if you don't disagree, if you don't agree with the work that they make, or you're not a big fan of the work that they make, you can actually still have a strong connection with that person and learn a lot from them. So I've seen a lot of times where, you know, even in public settings, you'd see two people, one of whom doesn't like the work of the other, and so they'd completely ice them out. They'd be like, they wouldn't even say hi to that person because it's like, oh, أنا ما أحب شغله, I don't like their work or whatever. Like, you know, and to me, it's just like, look, it's small. Like, a lot of us are really trying to, you know, make our best work here, you know, put in our best effort, like put our best foot forward. And I think what really matters in terms of networking is really celebrating and uplifting and pushing each other and being constructive. When we network, when we you know, offer feedback and we offer criticism, we can always be constructive about it, right? We don't have to be sort of, you know, gassing people up, you know, without any reason, but we can be at least respectful. And I think that's something that I've realized goes a long way here, because especially in the creative fields, a lot of people sort of view creative labor as something that should be underpaid, that is not as valued as, you know, your consultants or your accountants or your engineers, et cetera, et cetera. And so even when there's not a lot of money on the table, the least that you can do is be respectful, be supportive, celebrate each other's wins, be there for each other, and you know, help each other. Sort of, even if you think that someone's doing work that you don't like, you can actually have a conversation about them and be sort of you know, constructive in the way that you approach them about it, rather than being like destructive, taking people down. I think that's the worst way to network, really.
Good answer. Good answer. So show love and support and respect to others.
100%.
And their work and their efforts, really, because you know, because art can be very isolating. You know,
100%.
You know, like artists have a hard time just being themselves. You know, sometimes. So being ourselves
100%.
can be, you know, tough, because
Yeah.
it's us against us. You know, and us against the world, which is usually just us and our own heads.
Yeah.
You know? So what's something you wish that could be fixed in the industry that would smooth an artist's work and life?
Ooh.
Top 3 things.
Top 3 things that need to be fixed. Got it.
Either like in the system itself or by people running the system.
Yeah.
Just like everyday people, or by us even.
Totally. I think there's a huge information gap. The first thing that I will say is that I think there's a little bit of a gap between what we as artists have come to understand as art that is worth showing on a national or an international level, and what art institutions are actually willing to engage with and actually show, right? I think that art institutions in Bahrain, if, you know, presented with the right work and the work is framed in a very proper way, are more than willing to push the boundaries. I think we as artists have come to maybe misunderstand, you know, what kind of art can be made here, and it's led to this bit of an issue where I think we're self-censoring before we've even tried to do something, right? We've sort of prevented ourselves from trying something out before we've even tried it out, right? And I think that's a huge, it's a huge loss, because I think as a result, to we're not really challenging ourselves to make work that's exciting, that's pushing the boundary, that's new, that's engaging with issues that we really care about and that we should be caring about in this day and age. And it's because sometimes we think that, oh, but no, this work would never get shown anywhere here. Actually, don't think that way. I would argue, like, make the work, go for it, study it well, research it well, present the work in a way that really encourages art institutions to engage with these kinds of topics that you don't see represented. Just because you don't see it represented, in an art gallery or an art institution, doesn't mean that it can't be made and it can't be shown and it can't be supported. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing that I will say is that we as Bahrainis, we have such incredible minds. We have such incredible ideas. We're thinking at very high conceptual levels, way more than actually a lot of, other art scenes that I've seen both regionally and internationally. And that's amazing. That's really, really, really incredible. And I think one thing that I would push artists and creatives in the field here in Bahrain to do is to really have that research and have that sort of legwork that goes into making a piece of work, be on the forefront, right? Share with the people who are seeing your work, your level of research, the depth with which you're engaging with a topic, right? I think sometimes we sort of expect that art is there to be looked at and appreciated. And I think that's perfectly fine and well. Aesthetics are incredible. Technique is really important. But I think something that could really, really take us to the next level is the way that we talk about our art, the way that we present our art to the world, and the way that in which we really show people who are watching our art that, no, we're not just doing this because it looks pretty, right? It's not just about looking pretty and showcasing technique. It's really, really about engaging something that's deep within us as artists, deep within our societies that we navigate through. And having that be on the forefront of the work that we do, I think can really, really, really take our work to the next level. And then finally, I'm going to go back to the networking bit. Collaborate. I think there is such a myth of the artist in his or her studio locked up, art pouring out of their brains or out of their eyes or out of their orifices. Art doesn't happen that way, right? Like, it's just like, actually go collaborate, create collectives, work with people, or like even shadow people, observe their work, visit other people's studios, right? Art doesn't have to be this very insular practice that, it's like the more solo you are in the work that you do, the more that you are a genius. That's not that. In fact, I think that's one thing that I really, really, really have always carried with me from my theater experiences. The more the merrier, right? The more collaborative, the more community-based your practice is, the more that you're bringing people into your work and you're making your work accessible to as many people as possible, the more that you yourself can be pushing yourself forward, that you can have your work be understood and be engaged with on a much wider level. And so I think, yeah, I'm all for community-based art. I'm all for collaborative art. I'm all for collectives. I'm all for good relationships, good networks, and really, really, really having a lot of people in your circle who are going to challenge you and you can challenge them in return. I think that is something that we are getting so much better at, and I think we can do way more of, 100%.
How do you stay happy?
Oh, how do I stay happy? A lot of trash reality television, let me tell you. No, seriously, I mean, especially in my practice, I feel like sometimes I found myself dealing with topics and work that is very heavy, very, time consuming and mind consuming and brain challenging. And it really, really, really drains you. And so I think, not for nothing, but I think it's actually okay to go out and watch something that is a little mindless, that you can consume and it can sort of, clean the slate a little bit. Because otherwise, if you're going and watching like, with my deepest love to like all the award-winning works and films and television and music that's out there, sometimes some of that work can be really challenging and really asks you to engage with it on a much higher level. And do that by all means, but also it's okay if you want to go and watch, Dubai Bling. It's great. honestly, go. Have fun with it. Laugh at it. Laugh with it. It's totally okay to do something that is completely non-productive in the grand scheme of things, because that's where you actually recharge your battery, and that allows you to get back into the work with more vigor, with more excitement, with more, of a fresh perspective on things. So, big proponent of vegetating and being a couch potato and watching reality television. I love to go on walks and just walk around El Farij. This is the time to do it, really. And just take my mind off of things. That's really what I think keeps me happy and keeps me sane, is the ability to sort of separate, the times that my brain is on and the times that my brain is completely shut down, and it's actually just taking that moment to restore to factory settings, so to speak.
All right. Now the opposite is what makes you sad.
There's a lot that's happening in our world right now. Obviously, everything that is happening in Gaza, the ongoing occupation, the ongoing, not to use the G word, but to use the G word, that is really, really, really asking us to take a moment and pause and to find stillness and to really reflect on both the nonsensical nature of the world that we live in, but also is really also challenging us to stay engaged and stay plugged in, and to figure out how we can keep the conversation going, how we can contribute, how we can sort of shift the narrative when it comes to a lot of the really, really, really sad things that we see in the world around us. And so to see that this is obviously one of many incidents, we can talk about the climate crisis, we can talk about the economic crisis, and the way in which, even in the field that I work in, the media industry is being hit really hard. The games industry is being hit really hard. Workers are going on strike all around the world in different sectors and different fields. Like, we as a world, we are going through a really tough time right now. There's a lot that makes me sad to witness the way in which our societies feel like they're sort of falling apart at the seams. But I think, defeat is the weapon of the oppressor, et cetera, et cetera. I'm a true believer that, sadness can be a good thing. Sadness can actually be the thing that drives you forward, that really, really asks you to take action. Sadness can be a really, really invigorating thing that pushes you to make your best work, and to, hopefully make a small little action, even if it's, if you don't see the return on investment immediately, you kind of trust that this little small action is going to have ripples, in space and time, such that 10 years from now, this small action might actually have a big impact on the world that we live in, and hopefully make it a little bit of a better place. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot that makes me sad, but at the same time, I think it's also fodder for me and for us as communities to rise above and to really challenge ourselves to take action. And I think that's what matters at the end of the day.
Beautifully said, man. Good stuff. You're quite eloquent. How do you think you got this way? And do you think that it's something that you're born with, or something that you have honed?
I would be very much lying if it was like, if I said that it was a, from Allah above, divine nature, like second, like, oh, it's in my nature to be, it's not really. I think by virtue of my theater training, really, putting yourself on stage, putting yourself out there, as an actor, as a director, as a director in theater, you have to communicate with your actors, your designers, the way, even in film, even in audio, whatever you do in life, if you're like sort of in a directorial capacity, you're tasked with communicating your ideas clearly and concisely and with clarity. And sorry, clearly and concisely with clarity makes no sense. You get what I'm saying.
You're driving the point.
Yes, yeah. You get what I'm saying. And I think it's because of those many, many years and many, many environments that I've placed myself in, where I had to really challenge myself in terms of how clearly am I communicating, how well am I arguing, how well am I describing what I would like to get across to the person in front of me. And so it really is sort of something that was nurtured, and it was not nature by any measure. And if I were to give any words of advice, um, truly, 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 put yourself out there. Like, even if you're an introvert, take a public speaking class. You go to Toastmasters. Put yourself out there. Strike up a conversation with someone that you don't know. Really, really challenge yourself to be in situations where you have to articulate your ideas. And I think a lot of the time, we hide behind our desks, we hide behind our computer screens, we hide behind our phone screens. We're able to articulate sometimes our ideas in words, in writing very well. But I think the challenge is to really use our voice as a mechanism, as an instrument, and to perfect that instrument. And I think it's the same as playing guitar, right? The more that you do it, the more you get better at it. So really, 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 it's something that I developed through years and years of my work in theatrical practice. And I also want to shout out, a persuasive communication class that I took in college that really changed my life because, you kind of just realize that everything that you talk about is truly just, what am I saying? What are 2 points that I want to make about the thing that I'm saying? And how do I repeat the thing that I wanted to say in the first place? If you structure your speech like in that format, like I know what I want to say. I have 2 points to make about it, and then I'm gonna repeat the first point that I wanted to make. Done. Like you're gonna be a hit at parties. Just saying. Yeah.
Beautiful, man. One last thing, a
Go for
message
it.
to the world, like a message that you could leave to the world that you think would better it. Make it just a little bit better.
Yeah.
That's the final thing.
I'm gonna reference here a book that I read called Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown. Incredible thinker, incredible writer. And she talks about this idea of fractalization, fractal action. This idea that small actions have big impact. I think we, especially as Bahrainis, I will say this, I've noticed this about our people, we love to be extraordinary. We love to be the top of our game. We love to be, one of a kind. We love to be, sort of in an upper echelon where no one else is beside us. And I think that puts a lot of pressure on someone to be like, oh, everything that I do has to be incredible, has to be top notch, has to be at 100. To which I say, it's okay if not everything that you do is incredible. It's okay that if not everything that you do is top notch or at 100. And I think this applies to both creative practice. I've seen a lot of creatives who come up to me and they're like, I want to be an artist, or I want to have a creative practice, or I want to do something, or I want to paint a painting, or whatever. But then they sort of put themselves up to such a high standard. They think that I have to make the best thing possible from the get-go. And I tell them, you're not going to get the best thing that you ever want from the get-go. In fact, start with something bad and work up to something good. That's way better than just like, sitting there and being like, yes, I'm holding myself up to this impossible standard that I might never be able to meet. I think that applies to creative practice. I think that applies to when it comes to communal action, in terms of how we engage with the world around us. Especially, if I'm going to refer to what's happening in Palestine right now, I've heard a lot of people say, like, I feel helpless. I feel like I can't do anything. To which I say, but yes, that's valid. That's 100% valid. But at the same time, trust in the fact that that little Instagram story that you're posting, or that little donation that you're making to a family in order to help them evacuate, or, that conversation that you're having with a parent or with a friend, trust that that small little action that you're taking is enough, and that as imperfect as it might be, as much as it might not solve the huge problems and that face us, you can trust in the fact that that's enough and that has an impact in the long run. And so I'm a big believer in fractalization, in this idea that small actions have big meanings in the grand scheme of things, and just really, really, really going for it and doing something that feels like, oh, I don't feel great about this, you know, but challenge yourself to do something that might feel uncomfortable, because the moment that you do it, the more that you're going to get comfortable with making it better. And I think that is something that can apply to a lot of things in life. So really, give up on this idea of extraordinariness. I know it's hard. I know it's hard to be like, oh my gosh, I want to be special in this world. It's okay if for a moment
I struggle with that.
you allow yourself to not be special. I think that's perfectly okay. You're not, you know, you don't have to be the golden egg in the basket. Like, it's totally okay for you to just be a human being for the day, to do whatever little thing that you can do on any given day, and trust that that is enough. I think that is something that I personally would love to do a better job at. And I think that's something that could maybe, just maybe, make the world a little bit of a better place.
Good stuff, man. Thank you
Thank
for coming
you.
on.
Oh.
It's been great. How was it? How do you feel?
I feel great.